We now come to the last stage in the exposure attention perception topic. By perception, we mean the process of determining the properties of stimuli using our 5 senses: vision, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. Before we explore the properties of each of these different senses, we need to understand when we perceive a stimulus. For a stimulus of any kind to be perceived, it has to be above what we call the absolute perceptual threshold. This means that it has to exceed the minimum level of intensity needed to detect the stimulus presence. For example, if you turn down the volume of your computer below a certain level, you will no longer be able to hear my voice. The other question then is, when we make changes to a stimulus, how big does the change need to be so that it can be registered, so that the two stimuli, the original one and the modified one, are seen as different? This minimum amount of change is known as the just noticeable difference, and it can actually be expressed with a formula. This formula is known as Weber's law. According to this law, the minimum change needed so two stimuli can be perceived as different depends on the intensity or size of the original stimulus. The bigger the value or the intensity of the initial stimulus, which is denoted by capital S in the denominator of this equation, the greater the change required so that the second or modified stimulus can be seen as different. Now think about it. If you're playing music really loud, you will need to turn down the volume a lot more to make a perceptible difference than if the music was played in a low volume in the first place. Let me give you another example. Look at these two pairs of coffee cups. In both pairs, the right cup is larger than the left cup, but it's easier to see the difference in the top pair than the bottom pair. In fact, the difference, the right cup is bigger than the left cup by exactly the same size in both pairs. But the difference again is easier to perceive in the top because the top stimuli are smaller to begin with. Now that you know these properties of perception, can you think of situations in which marketers introducing a change to a product would like this change to exceed the just noticeable difference? That is, they would want to make sure that consumers notice the difference in the modified product. And conversely, can you think of examples of the reverse situation in which marketers making a change in a product would like this change to stay below the just noticeable difference? That is, they would want consumers to not notice the change. We said that we perceive through our 5 senses. Now let's look at some interesting properties of each of these senses. For example, our visual perception of the size and shape of a coffee cup, for example, helps us judge how much content or how much coffee is in the cup and how much we should drink. But besides things like volume, shape can also be associated with certain meanings. And for example, products or packages that have a round shape are perceived as cuter and sweeter than objects or packages that have elongated or angular shapes. The type of lettering or font used on a package can also make a difference. Some fonts are more liked than other fonts. And color can have multiple meanings. For example, different colors can symbolize different things. red can symbolize energy, speed, danger, whereas blue can symbolize peace, calm, and purity. Different colors can even induce different moods in consumers. For example, red can induce a more restless, high adrenaline mood, whereas green can induce a calmer mood. And these meanings, of course, can vary across different cultures. Just like color, sounds can also be associated with different meaning and can also be used to identify a product or a brand. For example, McDonald's has consistently used the same "I'm loving it" jingle, and this tune or jingle is now closely associated with the McDonald's brand. Taste perception, of course, is very important for food products. Taste can be very subjective, and it varies not only from one consumer to another, but the same product can actually taste differently to the same consumer depending on the context, on where it is consumed. For example, a fruit juice may taste better when we try a little small sample of it in the grocery store than when we drink the whole bottle at home. Finally, perceiving through touch and smell also plays an important role in marketing. For example, cosmetic creams that have a more smooth texture are perceived to be more effective and hydrating, even though the texture is not really related to the hydrating properties. And smell can be associated with different meanings. For example, citrusy or piney scents are associated with freshness and purity, and specific scents can serve as unique identifiers. For example, brands like Abercrombie & Fitch have used this property, and even though, for example, Abercrombie & Fitch is in the clothing business, they have designed their own unique scent, which consumers associate indistinguishably with the brand. So you already saw that perception can be very subjective and can vary across people and across contexts. We all like to look at optical illusion puzzles, which illustrate the extent to which our perception can be deceived. It can deceive us, actually. For example, the same color can appear much darker or lighter depending on the background, as you can see with the yellow square on this Rubik cube. And the same object can appear larger if it is in a vertical rather than horizontal position. This is known as the T illusion. For example, if you look at this T shape, you may think that the horizontal line is shorter than the vertical line, but in fact the two lines are of exactly the same size. Now this actually has implications for product packaging. For example, look at the two cans of crisp starch. They contain the exact same volume of starch, but the left container seems to contain a larger amount of product because it is in an elongated, longer shape. And finally, the 5 different senses can influence each other. And for example, potato chips, which are designed to make a more crunchy, crisp noise when eaten, are perceived to be fresher and to taste better. And adding more red color to a drink can increase its perceived sweetness.